My partner ridiculed me for wanting therapy, saying only weak people needed help. But when I found his private journal full of plans to isolate me from everyone, I realized he wasn't afraid of losing me, he was afraid of me healing. The first time I realized something was deeply wrong wasn't during a fight or a dramatic argument. It was in the quiet of an ordinary evening. I had mentioned almost casually that I was thinking about seeing a therapist. My voice was steady, but inside I was nervous. Therapy had always felt like a step toward healing, toward understanding myself better. His reaction was immediate, sharp, and dismissive. He leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "Only weak people need that kind of help." The words didn't just sting, they lodged themselves in my mind. I remember staring at him, waiting for some kind of softening, a laugh, maybe even a "just kidding." But none came. He carried on eating as if he hadn't just crushed something important to me. I sat there silent, wondering if maybe he was right. Maybe I was weak. That doubt became the seed of something larger, something that would grow quietly in the background of my life. It wasn't just therapy he dismissed. Slowly I began to notice how he disguised control as care. One Friday night I was getting ready to meet my old college friends. I had laid out a dress I hadn't worn in years, excited to feel like myself again. He walked into the room, glanced at the dress, and frowned. "You'll be uncomfortable in that," he said. "Besides, those people don't really care about you. Why waste your time?" His tone was calm, almost protective, but the message was clear. Stay home. I hesitated, then folded the dress back into the drawer. That night I stayed in, telling my friends I wasn't feeling well. It became a pattern. Invitations arrived, but I declined them. He always had a reason, sometimes subtle, sometimes blunt. "They'll just gossip about you. Your family doesn't understand you. You'll be exhausted tomorrow." Each excuse sounded reasonable in the moment, but together they built a wall around me. I didn't see it at first. I thought he was looking out for me. His comments about my clothes were another layer of this mask. He'd say things like, "That shirt makes you look sloppy," or, "You should wear something more flattering if you want people to take you seriously." He framed it as motivation, as if he were helping me improve. But the more he spoke, the smaller I felt. I began second-guessing every choice, what I wore, what I said, even how I laughed. It was as though my reflection in the mirror no longer belonged to me. The isolation crept in quietly. Friends stopped calling as often, probably tired of my constant excuses. Family visits grew rare. I remember one Sunday when my sister called, asking if I wanted to join her for lunch. I looked at him, waiting for his reaction. He shook his head slightly, almost imperceptibly, and I told her I couldn't make it. She sighed, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice. That was the last time she asked for months. I began to feel like I was living in a bubble, cut off from the world. At first I told myself it was just a phase, that life gets busy, that people drift apart. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. I started keeping notes, small scribbles in a notebook I hid in the back of a drawer. I wrote down the things he said, the moments that made me uneasy, the times I felt silenced. It wasn't a plan, not yet. It was just a way to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things. One entry read, "He told me therapy is for weak people." I felt ashamed. Another, "Skipped dinner with friends. He said they don't care." Over time, the pages filled with these fragments of my life, each one a piece of a puzzle I hadn't yet put together. There were smaller incidents too, ones that seemed trivial but carried weight. Like the time I bought a new pair of shoes, bright red, something that made me feel bold. He looked at them and laughed. "You're too old for those," he said. I returned them the next day. Or the evening I tried cooking a recipe my mother had taught me. He tasted it, grimaced, and said, "You should stick to simple meals." I pushed the plate away, appetite gone. Each moment chipped away at me, but I kept telling myself it was normal, that relationships were about compromise. Still, the notebook grew thicker, and with every entry I felt a quiet strength building. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I knew I needed to remember. The mask of concern was clever. To outsiders he looked like a caring partner, always reminding me to rest, always suggesting I stay home, always commenting on how I could improve. But behind that mask was something darker, something I couldn't yet name. One evening I sat alone in the living room, flipping through my notes. The house was silent, but my mind was loud. I realized that every page carried the same theme: control disguised as care. It wasn't love. It wasn't protection. It was something else entirely. That realization didn't come with fireworks or shouting. It came quietly like a whisper in the back of my mind. I closed the notebook, placed it back in the drawer and sat there in the dim light, wondering how much longer I could pretend everything was fine. I didn't have answers yet. I didn't know what I would uncover or how I would confront it. But I knew one thing. The mask was slipping and I was finally beginning to see what lay beneath. The night I found the journal was quiet, almost too quiet. He had left the house for a late errand, something about picking up supplies he claimed we needed. I was alone, sitting in the living room, the notebook I had been keeping tucked away in its drawer. My eyes wandered toward the cabinet near his desk, a place he always kept locked, though tonight for some reason the drawer was slightly ajar. I don't know what drew me to it. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe instinct. My hand trembled as I pulled the drawer open. Inside, beneath a stack of receipts and loose papers, was a leather-bound journal. It looked worn, the edges frayed as if it had been handled often. I hesitated, my heart pounding. Part of me whispered that I shouldn't invade his privacy. Another part reminded me of the growing unease I had been documenting in my own hidden notebook. I sat down with the journal in my lap, staring at the cover. My fingers hovered over the clasp, frozen in indecision. I thought about all the times he had silenced me, all the excuses he had given for keeping me away from people I loved. The hesitation broke. I opened it. The first page was ordinary. Dates, scribbles, reminders. But as I turned the pages, the words shifted into something darker. There were lists, carefully written, detailing ways to keep me focused. At first I thought it was harmless. Notes about chores, schedules, reminders. Then I saw the phrases, rewrite her texts before she sends them. Convince her family she's too busy. Control her calendar. No unplanned outings. My breath caught. I read line after line, each one a dagger. He had written strategies almost like instructions on how to isolate me. There were notes about conversations we'd had, twisted into his perspective. If she insists on therapy, remind her it's weakness. If she resists, guilt her with sacrifice. It was all there in his handwriting, undeniable. I felt the room spin. My hands shook as I flipped through more pages. He had recorded moments I thought were spontaneous, but to him they were calculated victories. She canceled lunch with her sister. Success. She returned the shoes. Reinforce insecurity. Each entry was proof that my doubts weren't paranoia. They were real. Fear and anger collided inside me. Fear because I realized how deeply he had planned this. Anger because I saw the truth. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of me healing, of me becoming strong enough to see through him. That realization burned in my chest. I closed the journal, pressing it against me as if holding it could steady my racing thoughts. My mind replayed every moment. The canceled dinners, the mocking comments, the silences. They weren't accidents. They were deliberate steps in a plan he had crafted. When he returned that night, I acted normal. I smiled, asked about the errands, listened to his casual chatter. Inside, though, I was different. I had seen behind the mask. I knew now that every word, every gesture had been part of a script. The next morning I decided to test him. I sent a short message to my sister. Thinking of you. Miss you. I kept it simple, something he wouldn't notice if he glanced at my phone. Hours later he asked casually, "Did you talk to anyone today?" His tone was light, but his eyes searched mine. I shook my head. He smiled, satisfied. That was confirmation enough. I tried again a few days later, sending a message to an old friend. This time he noticed. He picked up my phone when I left it on the table, scrolling quickly. "Why are you reaching out now?" he asked, his voice sharp. I shrugged, pretending it was nothing. He frowned, muttered something about people taking advantage and set the phone down. Each test revealed more. His reactions were too quick, too rehearsed. He wasn't just insecure, he was monitoring, controlling, ensuring his plans stayed intact. I began documenting these tests in my own notebook, pairing them with the entries from his journal. Together they painted a picture I couldn't ignore. One evening I slipped the journal back into the drawer, careful to leave it exactly as I found it. I didn't want him to suspect. But I kept thinking about the words I had read, the strategies he had written. They haunted me. I started planning in secret. I gathered small pieces of evidence. Screenshots of messages he altered, notes of conversations where his words matched the journal entries. I didn't know yet what I would do with them, but I knew I needed proof. Emotionally, I prepared myself too. I practiced keeping calm when he questioned me, hiding my anger when he mocked me, masking my fear when he grew suspicious. It was exhausting but necessary. There were moments when I almost broke. Like the night he asked, "Do you ever feel like people don't really care about you?" His tone was soft, almost tender. I wanted to scream, to throw the journal in his face and expose him. Instead, I nodded, pretending to agree. Inside, I was boiling. Another time, he suggested we start a shared calendar so he could help me stay organized. I smiled, agreed, and later wrote in my notebook, another layer of control. The journal became my secret weapon. Every time he tried to manipulate me, I remembered the pages. They gave me strength, reminding me that I wasn't imagining things. I began to see him differently. His smiles looked forced, his concern felt hollow, his words echoed with hidden meaning. The man I thought I knew was gone. In his place was someone who had built an entire plan to keep me small, silent, and dependent. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I would sit with my notebook, reviewing my notes, replaying his journal entries in my mind. I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. Dread because I knew the confrontation would come. Determination because I was finally ready to face it. I didn't rush. I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move and he would know I had seen the journal. So I waited, planned, and prepared. The Journal of Secrets had changed everything. It wasn't just a book of his thoughts. It was a blueprint of his control. And now it was the key to mine. The journal had become my secret weapon, tucked away in my mind like a loaded truth. Each page was proof, each line a reminder of the control he thought he had over me. I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. The moment had to come when I would look him in the eye and let him know I had seen everything. It happened on a rainy evening. The house was dim, the sound of water tapping against the windows filling the silence. He sat across from me at the table, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I placed my own notebook on the table, sliding it toward him. He glanced at it, confused. "I've been keeping notes," I said, my voice steady. "And I've read yours." His head snapped up, eyes wide. For the first time, I saw panic flicker across his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it again as if words had abandoned him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply held his gaze, letting the weight of silence press down on him. "You planned everything," I continued. "Every word, every excuse, every way to keep me away from the people I love." "I know." He stammered, trying to laugh it off. "You're overreacting. Those were just thoughts. Nothing serious." But his hands betrayed him. They trembled as he reached for his glass, spilling water onto the table. His calm mask was gone. I had pierced it and he knew it. That confrontation was the turning point. I didn't shout, I didn't argue. I simply revealed the truth, and his panic told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't afraid of losing me, he was terrified of me breaking free. The next step was reclaiming the connections he had tried to sever. I called my sister first. My voice shook as I explained, but when I told her about the journal, her outrage was immediate. "He wrote that? He planned to cut you off?" she asked, disbelief turning into anger. She insisted I come over, and for the first time in months I felt the warmth of family again. One by one I reached out to friends. Some had stopped calling, assuming I was too busy or uninterested. When I explained what had been happening, they listened with compassion, their shock turning into support. I showed them pieces of the journal, proof of the manipulation. Their outrage gave me strength. I wasn't alone anymore. Therapy became my lifeline. Walking into that office for the first time felt like stepping into sunlight after years of shadows. My therapist listened without judgment, helping me untangle the web of control I had been caught in. Each session was a step toward rebuilding my confidence, toward understanding that none of this had been my fault. I learned to recognize the patterns, the subtle ways he had twisted my reality. I learned to trust my instincts again. Therapy gave me tools, but more importantly, it gave me back my voice. With that strength, I began small acts of revenge, not cruel but powerful. I didn't scream or seek to hurt him. Instead, I exposed his lies. When he tried to present himself as the caring partner to others, I quietly shared the journal pages. When he claimed he had supported me, I revealed the truth. His image began to crumble piece by piece. One incident stands out. He had told a mutual friend that I was too fragile to handle social gatherings. I handed her a copy of the journal entry where he had written, "Convince her she's too fragile." Her face hardened and she never looked at him the same way again. That was my revenge truth. The more I shared, the more his control slipped away. He couldn't hide behind his mask anymore. People saw him for who he was, and the isolation he had tried to impose on me turned back on him. My healing journey wasn't instant. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying his words, feeling the sting of doubt. But each morning I reminded myself, I had broken free. I had turned the tables. Freedom felt like breathing deeply after years of holding my breath. It felt like laughter with my sister, coffee with old friends, quiet evenings where I could choose what to wear, what to cook, where to go, without someone hovering over me. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about hurting him. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about showing him and everyone else that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't fragile, that I wasn't his to control. The final closure came quietly. I sat alone one evening, journal in hand, flipping through the pages one last time. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt peace. I closed the book, placed it back in the drawer, and walked away. That chapter of my life was over. I had faced the mask, uncovered the secrets, and turned the tables. And in the end, I found something far greater than revenge. I found myself.